So late last fall, I decided it was time to lose some weight and figured it was time to give up sugar, which is my thing that I often give up. So I timed it well. I still got to participate in Halloween, but then I would give up. I needed to rest and rejuvenate. So I got in my car, started, a glass of red wine would be perfect. And so I engage in a familiar debate with myself that I'm sure none of you are familiar with. I said to myself, no, you said you won't have any sugar for the next month, and wine is sugar. No. Well, yes, but it's been a really long week and it's Saturday night. So, I deserve to relax. You can never stick to what you say you're going to do. Every time you say you're going to eat healthy, you fail. You're never going to lose weight. And in this conversation, in this chatter in my brain, in this negative back and forth that I had with myself, which I'm sure many of you have in different ways and forms, for a moment, God's grace opened up on me in the space in my car as I was driving home. I noticed that one of my favorite songs was playing, and that there was a gorgeous sunset in front of me as I drove west to Minneapolis. And I heard this quiet, calm voice in my head and in my heart that said, "Isn't this enough?" And in that moment, in that quiet, grace-filled moment, I was given a glimpse into the fullness and limits of my life. I had been so preoccupied by what I thought I needed and deserved, the desire to relax, to celebrate, to let go, and those preoccupations pulled me away from the beautiful moment that was before me, this gorgeous sunset, this perfect song, this lovely life, and the life that dwells in me. Grace brought me for a moment away from my spiral of negative self-talk and unhelpful dialogue, took me away from those times where I dwell on my weaknesses and so easily beat myself up. It was a moment of grace in my life. And as I looked into Lent this month, I found myself remembering that moment in my car, because Lent has always been a struggle for me. It reminds me so well of my weaknesses, and it's a really tempting time for me to beat myself up. Because often when I think about what Lent is, I think that it's a time for me to be strong, it's a time for me to be committed, and it's a time for me to be good. And I am frequently none of these. And I am honestly tired of trying to be strong and committed and good. I just want to relax, and preferably with a glass of wine. And I think for many of us, it's so easy to think that our Christian life, and particularly these next 40 days, is all about being strong and stoic and just resisting temptation at left and right. And it's hard not to imagine that that's what Jesus was doing in the gospel we heard today, because it seems like he has those perfect responses to the devil, right? Those really witty things that we just wish we could say to other people. The devil says this to him, and he's like, nope, I got this. How about this? Nope, I got this. And he's so quick, and he knows it, and he's God. Of course he knows it. But I don't think that's really what the point of this story is about. It's not about being good at resisting temptation, or about being strong or stoic or being a savior. Because we have to remember in this story, we are seeing the humanity of Jesus. We are seeing the God that we proclaim as both divine and human. That divine part is often easy for us to understand because it's separate from us. We can imagine what that's like. But it's hard for us sometimes to believe that Jesus truly walked as we walked and was truly tempted as we're tempted. But that's what we proclaim, and that's what this gospel shows us today. I don't believe that this story about Jesus is necessarily a story about his strength in the midst of temptation, or our need to copy that strength. I believe this story is a story about vulnerability, of weakness, of struggle, of limitations. It's a story about a young man who was hungry. A young man who had wandered in the desert alone for 40 days and 40 nights. A young man who had just been called by God, but was still not quite certain where to go next. And his journey was not so different than his long-ago ancestors of Adam and Eve. His eyes had just been opened to the world, and he was wondering, where's the truth? Where's God? What was he called to do? And who was he to trust? This story is the story about being human, about wondering, seeking, about loneliness, questions. Jesus walked this same path. He was hungry, but not just for food, but for all the things that humanity hungers for. Things like love, acceptance, power, and control. He was tempted. He was tempted just like Adam and Eve, because he was also hungry for knowledge, for security, for completeness. And he is hungry, or was hungry just as we are, for life, for fulfillment, for peace, and for answers. Throughout our lives, but I think especially during these 40 days, we often are led to think and sometimes taught to believe that the hunger within us is something bad. That story of Adam and Eve, the fact that they hungered was bad. The fact that Jesus was tempted was bad. That hunger and temptation is something we're supposed to conquer or rise above. But I don't think that's the case. I think that hunger inside of us is the holy. That hunger in us is the deep knowledge within ourselves that we are beloved, and that hunger inside of us is the presence of life itself and our seeking for that life. As many of you know, I'm married to a Buddhist monk. I'm probably one of the only Catholic priests that's married to a Buddhist monk. And I've been so blessed to learn about his faith. And it seems so often there's a bit of more of an ease in the Buddhist tradition when it comes to the struggles we face and the hungers and the temptations in our lives. And I found this one paragraph in one of his books. The book is called Opening the Hand of Thought. And I thought it might fit well as we enter into this journey of Lent. So it goes. Since desires and cravings are actually a manifestation of life, there is no reason to hate them or try to extinguish them. And yet, if we become dragged around by them and chase after them, our life becomes fogged over. The important point here is not to cause life to be fogged over by thoughts based on our desires or cravings, but to see all thoughts and desires as resting on the foundation of life, to let them be as they are, yet not be dragged around by them. It is not a matter of making great efforts not to be dragged around by desires. It is just about waking up and returning to the reality of life that is essential. I think looking at that quote and looking at our gospel, we are opened up to the possibility that the devil is not in our hunger, but rather God is in our hunger. The devil perhaps is in those foggy spaces when we allow ourselves to be pushed and dragged by our desires and cravings. But God is in the hunger. Adam and Eve did not commit a sin by wanting to eat those apples. That desire, that hunger that they had was not a weakness. It was and is the most astounding and beautiful part of humanity. We hunger, we crave, we seek. But in the story of Adam and Eve, we see in ourselves our most common failure. When we fail to recognize that the hunger, the craving, the seeking within us is for God. The holy, the life is what apple or for a glass of wine, because those will never satiate our hunger. In Jesus, we see exactly how to be human, how to fully live within our hunger. And that is to time and time again return to God, to our beloved Creator, to realize that the craving within us is the most powerful part of us, because it is there in the depths of our stomach and the pit of our heart that God speaks and life dwells. This Lenten journey, as we remind ourselves to turn to God, we certainly hold on to the parts of us that have failed in doing that. But more than anything, our turning to God is about remembering who we are. Remembering that we are beloved, that we are beautiful humans, created with hunger, filled with the holy spark of life. Just before Jesus stepped into the desert, the heavens broke open upon him. And the voice of God said to him, "This is my beloved Son, with whom I am well pleased." And so tonight, as we step into these 40 days, as we go into the deserts of our own lives, God speaks those same words to us. To each and every one of us, he says, "You are my beloved child. With you I am well pleased." And when we hold on to those words, that the hunger, the craving, the temptation, we can always remember that that can bring us back to the depths of our being, where God's voice is calling us, bringing us back time and time again to life itself, to the truth of our belovedness. If we are tempted or crave or hunger 1,000 times, these 40 days are a journey into life, into the beauty of our humanity and the glory of our beloved Creator. Let us set out together, holding on to our good, powerful hunger, and discover how God can change us and change the world through that hunger.